What if one perfect routine could become your last breath? Behind the beauty, power, and applause of gymnastics lies a brutal reality few dare to face. These are not accidents meant to be forgotten, but moments where a single slip turned dreams into tragedy. Here are the 10 most terrifying gymnastics death stories that expose how unforgiving perfection can be. Elena Mukina. Elena Mukina was not just a gymnast, she was a symbol. In the late 1970s, at the height of the Cold War, her body became a billboard for Soviet superiority. In 1978, at the World Championships in Strasbourg, she stunned the world by winning the all-around gold, defeating legends and rewriting expectations. The Soviet Union celebrated her as a miracle, young, fearless revolutionary. Her routines were daring, her style bold, her name suddenly inseparable from national pride. Victory followed her everywhere, but so did something far more dangerous: obligation. Behind the medals and applause, Elena lived inside a system that did not recognize limits. The Soviet sports machine demanded perfection, not health. When she broke her leg in 1979, it should have been a pause, a moment for recovery. Instead, it became an inconvenience. Her cast was removed early. She was ordered to lose weight rapidly. Pain was dismissed. Weakness was ignored. The Moscow Olympics were approaching, and Elena was expected to be ready no matter the cost. Her body was already failing, but the machine kept moving. Then came the skill that would seal her fate, the Thomas Salto. A tumbling pass so dangerous it was designed for male gymnasts, rarely attempted by women. Elena didn't want to do it. She said so openly. She warned her coach Mikhail Klemenko again and again that it was too risky. She said she could break her neck. Her words vanished into the air of the training hall. Refusal was not an option. In that system, hesitation meant replacement. Silence meant survival until it didn't. On July 3, 1980, inside the Minsk Palace of Sport, Elena ran. She tumbled, and in a split second she under-rotated. Her chin slammed into the floor with a sound witnesses never forgot. The gym froze. Elena didn't move. She had broken her neck and was instantly paralyzed from the neck down. Panic spread behind closed doors, not for her life, but for the image of Soviet dominance. The truth was buried. The public was told conflicting stories. A fall from the balance beam, a vault accident. Anything but the reality that she had been forced to perform a skill she had warned could destroy her. Elena survived, but her life as she knew it was over. She never lashed out publicly. She never screamed accusations. In rare interviews, she spoke quietly, almost calmly, exposing a system that treated athletes as tools rather than people. She said victories mattered more than lives. She did not even fully blame her coach, describing him as another cog following orders. Honors followed medals, state awards, ceremonial recognition, but none of them gave her back her body, her youth, or her dream. Elena Mukina lived 26 years trapped inside the aftermath of that moment. When she died in 2006 at the age of 46, her legacy remained haunting, not as a champion who fell, but as proof of what happens when a nation demands perfection at any cost. Julissa Gomez. Gymnastics has always been presented as a vision of elegance and control, a sport where danger seems carefully hidden behind polished routines, pointed toes, and confident smiles. Yet beneath that illusion exists a reality that is far more brutal. One slip, one misjudged moment can erase a future forever. In May 1988, at the World Sports Fair in Tokyo, that truth surfaced in front of the world. As the arena buzzed with anticipation and Olympic dreams quietly took shape, a 15-year-old American gymnast prepared to compete. Her name was Julissa Gomez, and she stood at the edge of greatness, carrying expectations far heavier than her years. Born on November 4, 1972 in San Antonio, Texas, Julissa came from humble beginnings. Her parents, Otilia and Romero Gomez, were former farm workers who devoted their lives to giving their daughter an opportunity beyond the limits they had known. Gymnastics entered Julissa's life early and claimed her completely. By the age of 5, her natural talent was undeniable. By 10, she was training in elite gyms in Houston, rapidly climbing through the junior ranks. In 1986, she placed 4th in the all-around at the U.S. Championships, quietly announcing herself as a rising force. By the following year, she was representing the United States on international stages, already viewed as a legitimate Olympic contender. Behind her calm expression, however, pressure was building. In 1987, Julissa made a courageous decision to leave a notoriously harsh training environment in search of a more supportive one, joining coach Al Fong in Missouri. He believed in her potential, but belief could not slow the relentless Olympic clock. As the 1988 Games approached, her future narrowed to one event and one skill, the Yurchenko vault. Powerful, explosive, and unforgiving, it required a blind takeoff and absolute precision. Coaches noticed her inconsistency and hesitation, yet the expectations never eased. Competing the vault was no longer a choice, it was an obligation. On May 5, 1988, during warm-ups for the vault final, Julissa sprinted toward the apparatus as she had done countless times before. In a fraction of a second, everything unraveled. Her foot slipped, her takeoff faltered, and her body rotated out of control. In front of stunned spectators, she crashed headfirst into the vaulting horse. The arena fell into a chilling silence. Julissa lay motionless as doctors rushed to her side. The diagnosis was immediate and devastating. Her neck was broken, leaving her paralyzed from the neck down. What had begun as a routine warm-up became a life-altering catastrophe. Julissa was rushed to the hospital as her parents flew across the world to reach her. Doctors fought to stabilize her condition, but oxygen deprivation caused irreversible brain damage. She slipped into a coma, unable to speak or move, her world reduced to blinking eyes. For 3 years, her parents never left her side, even as the spotlight faded and the sport moved forward. On August 8, 1991, Julissa Gomez passed away at just 18 years old. Her death forced long overdue changes in gymnastics safety and equipment, leaving behind a legacy not defined by medals, but by the hidden cost of chasing perfection. If Julissa Gomez's story shook you, leave a 1 in the comments to honor her memory. One number, one life. One reminder of how high the cost of perfection can be for Julissa Gomez. Melanie Coleman. Melanie Coleman's story did not begin with rebellion or risk. It began with routine, with trust, with the quiet confidence of an athlete who had spent most of her life inside the gym and believed it was the safest place in the world. By 2019, Melanie was not chasing Olympic fame or pushing the limits of danger. She was a seasoned collegiate gymnast, disciplined, experienced, and deeply respected. Gymnastics was not just what she did, it was the rhythm of her everyday life. Raised in Milford, Connecticut, Melanie grew up in a family where gymnastics ran through generations. Her mother had competed, her sisters had competed, one of them even trained and competed alongside her at Southern Connecticut State University. The gym was familiar, almost sacred. She trained for years at New Era Gymnastics, a place that shaped her skills and her character. She knew the equipment, she knew the routines. Nothing about her training was reckless or rushed. That same year, Melanie was recognized as a Scholastic All-American by the Women's Collegiate Gymnastics Association, honoring her balance of academic excellence and athletic dedication. She was studying to become a nurse, following the path of her older sisters. Despite a demanding schedule, she spent her free time coaching young children at the very gym where she trained. To those kids, some barely old enough to walk, Melanie was more than a coach. She was their first hero, the proof of what dedication could look like. On November 8, 2019, inside the familiar walls of New Era Gymnastics, Melanie was training on the uneven bars. It looked like any other practice. No experimental skills, no unnecessary risks, just repetition and muscle memory. Then, without warning, she slipped. The fall happened in an instant, but its impact was catastrophic. When she hit the mat, coaches knew immediately that something was wrong. Paramedics were called as panic spread through the gym that had always felt so safe. Melanie was rushed to Yale New Haven Hospital. Her coach, Thomas Alberti, who had trained her for nearly a decade, watched helplessly as the reality set in. Doctors fought to save her, but the spinal injury was devastating. 2 days later, on November 10, 2019, Melanie Coleman passed away. She was only 20 years old. The gymnastics community was stunned. This was not a dangerous stunt gone wrong. It was a routine training session, proof that even familiarity offers no guarantees. In the days that followed, grief rippled far beyond Connecticut. Tributes poured in from athletes and coaches who had never met her but felt the weight of her loss. Her family spoke of an irreplaceable absence, an empty space that would remain in every future photograph. It was later revealed that Melanie had quietly registered as an organ donor, giving others a chance at life without ever seeking recognition. A community fundraiser raised tens of thousands of dollars in her memory. Melanie Coleman left behind no scandal, no controversy, only the haunting reminder that sometimes tragedy arrives without reason, even in places built on trust and control. Christy Henrich. Christy Henrich was never the tallest gymnast in the room, but she was often the strongest presence. At just 4 feet 10 inches tall, she carried herself with a quiet intensity that made judges look twice. Born on July 18, 1972, Christy rose quickly through the ranks of American gymnastics, fueled by discipline, precision, and an unshakable desire to be perfect. By the late 1980s, she was no longer just promising, she was essential. A member of the U.S. national team, she represented her country at the 1989 World Championships in Stuttgart, where she helped the American team secure a 4th-place finish and came heartbreakingly close to an individual medal on the uneven bars. The Olympics were no longer a distant dream. They were within reach. But behind the elegant routines and controlled landings, another battle had already begun. At the 1988 World Championships in Budapest, Christy was pulled aside by a judge and given a sentence that would quietly reshape her life if she wanted to make the Olympic team. She needed to lose weight. At the time, she weighed just 95 pounds. The comment was not shouted, it wasn't cruel on the surface, it was delivered calmly, professionally, like a rule of the sport, and Christy listened. What followed was not sudden but relentless. Her eating became more restricted, her training intensified, the mirror became an enemy, the scale a judge that never showed mercy. On the outside, Christy continued to smile, continued to compete, continued to embody the image of control that gymnastics demanded. Inside, her body was beginning to disappear. Coaches noticed, teammates worried. Al Fong, who had already witnessed the devastating cost of pressure in the sport, confronted her in 1989. He urged her to get help. Doctors, nutritionists, and specialists were brought in, but Christy refused to let go of the dream she believed depended on perfection. By 1990, her weight had dropped to a terrifying 47 pounds. Her body could no longer sustain elite competition. She stepped away from gymnastics, but the voice in her head did not fade with the applause. The next 4 years became a cycle of hope and collapse, hospital stays, psychiatric treatment, moments of recovery followed by relapse. The sport that had shaped her identity was gone, but its demands lingered in silence. In the summer of 1994, Christy was admitted to Research Medical Center in Kansas City. Her body was exhausted, her organs were failing, there was nothing left to draw from. On July 26, just 8 days after her 22nd birthday, Christy Henrich died as her body shut down one system at a time. Her death sent shockwaves far beyond gymnastics. It forced an uncomfortable reckoning with a culture that had praised discipline while ignoring destruction. In the years that followed, the sport began to change slowly, reluctantly addressing nutrition, mental health, and the language used to judge young bodies. Christy Henrich's legacy was not written in medals, but in the painful realization that perfection, when demanded without mercy, can be deadly. If Christy Henrich's story touched your heart, leave a comment below to share your condolences. Sang Lan. In July 1998, New York City glowed with the promise of unity as the Goodwill Games filled the arena with lights, flags, and controlled celebration. Among the athletes was Sang Lan, a 17-year-old Chinese gymnast and reigning national vault champion. Calm, composed, and precise, she stood at the end of the runway, preparing for what was meant to be nothing more than a routine warm-up, not a final, not a risk, not a just repetition, muscle memory honed through years of discipline. Sang Lan was already a rising symbol of Chinese gymnastics, admired for her power on vault and her quiet confidence. That confidence extended beyond her own body to the environment around her, the equipment, the officials, the invisible rules meant to keep athletes safe. As she sprinted forward and launched into the air, something went catastrophically wrong. Mid-flight control vanished. There was no time to adjust. She came down headfirst with a sound that froze the arena. When she didn't move, panic spread instantly. She was rushed to Nassau University Medical Center, where emergency spinal surgery followed. Doctors worked to stabilize her shattered spine, but the damage was irreversible. Sang Lan was left paralyzed from the chest down. In a matter of seconds, her gymnastics career was over, along with the independence she had never imagined losing. The world responded with sympathy and spectacle. Flowers flooded her hospital room. Celebrities sent messages. She became an international symbol of courage almost overnight. But beneath that carefully curated image, a quieter story began to surface. From her hospital bed, Sanglan said the fall was not simply an accident. She claimed that moments before her attempt, a coach from another team had stepped into the vault area and removed a safety mat without warning. When she tried to speak about it, her words were dismissed, explained away as confusion caused by trauma. The official narrative moved on without her. During her recovery in the United States, Sanglan was placed under the care of a Chinese-American couple who promised support. Years later, she would allege that control replaced care. Her communication restricted, her treatment limited, her voice managed. When she returned to China in 1999, she was celebrated as a national icon. She smiled for cameras, hosted television programs, and lit the Olympic torch in 2008. Publicly, she embodied resilience. Privately, her health declined as therapy faded and promises dissolved. In 2011, 13 years after the fall, Sanglan filed a lawsuit in the United States alleging negligence, mishandling, and betrayal of trust. The case was complex and polarizing, tangled in time and power. But for Sanglan, it was never just about compensation. It was about reclaiming a story taken from her at 17 and refusing to let silence be the final verdict. Tyler Sabapathy. The night of January 26, 2025. Philadelphia was no longer a city. It was an explosion. Streets flooded with green jerseys, fireworks tore through the winter sky, and chants echoed between glass towers as the Eagles' victory ignited Center City. In the middle of that chaos was 18-year-old Tyler Sabapathy, a freshman at Temple University, caught in the electric surge of celebration. To most, he was just another fan. To those who knew him, Tyler was something else entirely, a decorated gymnast with more than 120 medals, a young man whose life had been defined by balance, control, and flight. As crowds pressed tighter at 15th and Market Street's adrenaline took over, fans climbed light poles, daring gravity, feeding off cheers. To many, it looked reckless. To Tyler, it felt familiar. Years of gymnastics had trained his body to trust height, grip, and movement. The steel pole became an apparatus, the roaring crowd his audience. As he climbed higher, cheers erupted. For a moment, it looked effortless, another display of confidence from a boy who had always owned the air. Then, without warning, everything betrayed him. A single slip, fast, merciless, sent Tyler crashing down. His body twisted mid-air before slamming onto the concrete below. The sound cut through the celebration like a scream. Cheers dissolved into panic. Fireworks kept exploding above, but on the street, people froze in horror. Paramedics fought through the crowd as sirens split the night, rushing him to Jefferson Hospital while the city's victory curdled into shock. Tyler remained on life support for 2 days. His family waited surrounded by machines and prayers, but the brain injuries were too severe. On January 28th, Tyler Sabapathy died. He was just 18. Temple University mourned a student admired for discipline and ambition. His teammates lost a brother. His family lost a son who had left Toronto chasing dreams and never came back. Videos from that night still circulate online, crowds cheering, bodies climbing a city celebrating. But for those who loved Tyler, that footage marks the moment when a young gymnast, once untouchable in the air, fell for the last time. Maitlin. Gymnastics is built on an unspoken promise that when an athlete leaves the ground, someone has made sure the place they land is safe. On the night of June 18, 2009 in Townsville, Australia, that promise collapsed. 19-year-old Maitlin rushed out the door for training, calling back to her mother with a casual question about dinner. "Are we having steak when I get home?" It was an ordinary moment, effortless and unguarded. She never came home. It was the last sound her mother would ever hear from her. Inside the gymnastics Townsville facility, the evening felt routine. The rhythm of training echoed through the gym, feet striking mats, bodies rotating through the air, coaches calling encouragement. Michelle wasn't chasing medals or elite selection. She had stepped away from competitive gymnastics years earlier after repeated childhood injuries and had returned simply to rediscover the joy of the sport she loved. That night, she attempted a backward twisting layout, an advanced skill that demands precision and trust. For a split second, everything looked right. Then the rotation carried too far. Instead of landing on a fully protected surface, Michelle came down headfirst onto bare concrete. A section of the floor that should have been covered by 6 meters of safety matting was exposed. Only half the required padding was in place. Someone had moved the mat earlier that day and never put it back. No one noticed. No one checked. When her head struck the concrete, the sound was so violent it silenced the entire gym. Coaches and teammates rushed toward her, but the damage was already done. Michelle was taken to Townsville General Hospital in critical condition. Her family waited through the night, holding on to hope that quietly slipped away by morning. Michelle had died from catastrophic head injuries. Investigators later revealed a chain of failures. Her coach was not qualified to teach, the skill safety procedures were ignored, and basic checks were never performed. Gymnastics. Townsville was fined $70,000, but for Michelle's family, it was meaningless. Her mother called it bitter justice. Michelle Maitlin did not die because gymnastics is dangerous. She died because something simple, preventable, and invisible was allowed to be ignored. Anton Malej. By 1930, Anton Malej was already a national hero. At just 23 years old, he had stood on the Olympic podium in Amsterdam, a bronze medal around his neck and a future that seemed limitless. In Yugoslavia, his name carried pride, discipline, and the promise of greatness still to come. The World Championships in Luxembourg were supposed to be another step forward, another chapter in a career that looked destined for immortality. Instead, it became the place where gymnastics quietly failed one of its own. From the beginning, the competition felt cursed. Torrential rain flooded the city, forcing organizers into a rushed and careless decision. The outdoor stadium was abandoned, and the entire event was moved into a cramped school gym. There was no time for proper preparation. Apparatuses were set up hastily. Mats were thin and inadequate, barely more than padding in name alone. Safety took a back seat to schedule and spectacle. The athletes noticed, but they had trained too long and dreamed too hard to walk away. When Anton mounted the rings, he was calm and precise, his movements controlled by years of sacrifice. The routine unfolded beautifully, strength and grace locked in perfect balance. Then came the dismount, the final moment, the point where everything depends on what waits below. Anton released, dropped, and hit the floor. The mat collapsed instantly. There was no cushion, no protection. His body crumpled under the force. The gym fell into stunned silence. No cameras rushed forward. No emergency teams charged in. Only panic whispers and the horrifying realization that something had gone terribly wrong. Anton was taken to a local hospital, but the truth was clear almost immediately. His spine had shattered beyond repair. He survived the night clinging to life as his teammates waited in disbelief. By the morning of July 15, 1930, Anton Malej was dead. The competition continued. Medals were awarded. Applause echoed hollowly through the same space where a champion had fallen. When Anton's body returned home days later, more than 10,000 people lined the streets of Ljubljana to say goodbye. His grave, marked by a bronze bust, still stands today, not just as a tribute to a great gymnast, but as a warning. Anton Malej did not die because he made a mistake. He died because those responsible for protecting him chose to look away. Nguyen Minh Triet. Nguyen Minh Triet was only 18 years old, but he carried the weight of an entire household on his shoulders. In Vietnam's gymnastics circles, his name was spoken with quiet admiration. A prodigy who started training at 7 joined the national youth team by 12 and collected national titles before most teenagers finished middle school. By 15, he was already a pillar of the sport, known for his discipline and relentless drive. But outside the gym, Triet was something else entirely. The main provider for his family, handing over nearly every paycheck from training to support a sick mother, a retired father working night shifts, a fragile older brother, and a 5-year-old sister who barely understood what her brother was sacrificing. On November 10, 2023, at the National Sports Training Center in Hanoi, Triet was doing what he had done countless times before. 2 backflips into a foam pit, an exercise designed to be safe, controlled routine. There was no competition, no pressure from a crowd, no dramatic risk. And yet in that thin margin where gymnastics offers no forgiveness, something went wrong. His body rotated just enough offline. His neck absorbed the landing. In an instant, his arms and legs stopped responding. paralysis set in before anyone fully understood what had happened. Triet was rushed from hospital to hospital as doctors fought to keep his body functioning. Machines breathed for him, tubes fed him. Through the pain and immobility, he whispered words that haunted everyone who heard them. "I really appreciate life. I want to keep living." His coach, Major Hoang Trung Lin, later admitted those words broke him. Everyone knew the chances were slim, but no one was ready to let go. Vietnam's sports community rallied. Donations poured in. The Gymnastics Federation ensured he received the best care available. Still, the injury was too severe. Willpower could not undo a shattered neck. On May 9, 2024, after months of silent struggle, Nguyen Minh Triet passed away. More than 200 people gathered at his funeral. Coaches, teammates, soldiers, neighbors, each one aware that they were burying more than an athlete. They were burying a son who carried responsibility far beyond his years, a teenager who trained for glory while holding his family together behind the scenes. Triet did not die chasing fame. He died in training, doing exactly what he had been taught to trust. His story remains a stark reminder that in gymnastics, the smallest miscalculation can end not just a career, but a life built on sacrifice. Thank you for staying until the end and watching our video. Leave a 2 in the comments if you're still here with us, standing in quiet respect for Nguyen Minh Triet and the dream he never got to finish. Alexandra Huchi. On the morning of August 15, 2001, the legendary gymnastics halls of Diva, Romania were quiet in the way only elite training centers ever are: focused, disciplined, almost sacred. This was the birthplace of champions, the factory of Olympic gold. Inside that space trained a 12-year-old girl named Alexandra Huchi, barely 55 pounds slight even by gymnastics standards, yet spoken about in whispers by coaches who believed she carried something rare. Alexandra was not loud, she was not reckless. She was precise, serious, and far too young to be carrying the weight of a nation's expectations. That day was supposed to be light training. Alexandra had been nursing a sore wrist and was not scheduled for full routines. No falls, no dangerous skills, no visible warning signs. After finishing a drill, she climbed out of the foam pit and approached her coach, Liliana Kozma. Her voice was barely audible. She said she needed to use the restroom. Minutes later, she returned, pale, trembling, and whispered again, "I can't continue." She had just vomited. Within moments, everything